Alright, what is up everyone, and welcome to another edition of Realms Album Quest Live. I hope everyone is doing well today. For those of you who are watching on Twitch, those first couple songs you heard on the stream today, the first one was the new cover of Burning Down the House by Paramore from the upcoming Talking Heads tribute album, Stop Making Sense tribute album. Going to be a banger by the looks of things. Lots of cool artists on that one, and great new cover from Paramore to kick that one off. And then we also heard the new single Bandit by Don Toliver, which I've been enjoying quite a bit. A sort of rage inspired cut that probably one of the hardest things he's ever made, and honestly just a very hard trap song generally. I've been digging that one quite a bit. So yeah, not that many albums to talk about this week compared to my usual shows. Last week we did something ridiculous like 24. I don't even think we're hitting half that number today. There just weren't that many albums that I felt were particularly significant that warranted talking about on Realms Album Quest Live this week. So yeah, it might be a slightly shorter edition than perhaps you're used to. But hopefully, nonetheless, you enjoy what you hear today, and I've got some pretty good recommendations to give you, if I do say so myself. So yeah, without further ado, we will move into the first segment of the show, which, as usual, is What's New Part 1, where I talk about a series of new albums that came out over the course of the last 7 days or so, and whether there's merit in them or not, whether you should listen to them, and then we'll listen to some tracks from those. As always, if you're watching this on YouTube as well, there will be a playlist linked in the description where you can listen to every song that I play during the stream as well. So yeah, make sure to listen along with those if you are interested. So, as per usual, the first record I will talk about this week is going to be my favourite project that came out over the last week, and I am hesitant in using the word album because this one is actually an EP, but it is my favourite project of the ones that I listened to that came out over the last week or so, and that is the new EP, the collaboration EP from Birds in Row and Coil Guns, which is called You and I in the Gap. Now, this is very, very good stuff. Yeah, collaboration between the French post-hardcore band Birds in Row and sort of post-rock, noise rock type band Coil Guns, which they're from Switzerland, I believe, and it's just really, really strong stuff. I was really enjoying these tracks. They seem like some of the hardest stuff that Birds in Row has ever made. You know, I've listened to a few Birds in Row records before. This was my first introduction to Coil Guns, but their influence on this one, I'd say, is actually fairly prevalent, because it feels like quite a big sort of detour from what I'm particularly familiar with Birds in Row. You know, generally speaking, the post-hardcore on this one is very apparent, but there's more than that. You know, there does feel like a few more noisier, more sort of dissonant influences on this one, I suppose, that just make the whole thing sound a lot darker, moodier, and just, you know, generally a lot more atmospheric perhaps than Birds in Row's previous efforts. You know, not to say necessarily that their previous efforts were bad or anything like that. In fact, I'm quite a big fan of their album Gris Klein that dropped a couple of years ago, but this one really enjoyable. Just 3 tracks, extends to about 17 minutes. The first couple are around the 6-minute mark, and then the last track, the title track, is about 4 minutes long. That's the one I'm going to play for you in just a second. But yeah, vocally, I think that the vocalists on this one absolutely top notch. The guitar riffs on this one are amazing. The drums are, you know, absolutely wonderful. The really heavy the approach on this one. I think generally speaking, it's just a really strong, really enjoyable post-hardcore EP. Only 17 minutes, so if it does sound like your kind of thing, definitely worth checking out. And yeah, I will now play for you You and I in the Gap, the title track from this record by Birds in Row and Coil Guns, and I hope you enjoy. God damn, what a banger. What a big banger. That one goes so hard. I love the guitars on that track in particular. And honestly, I would recommend checking out the other 2 tracks on the EP as well. The opener is pretty good, but I really also like the Blessing, which is the second track on the EP. That one is a little bit longer, around the 6 minute mark, but that gives it just a bit more space to breathe, a bit more space to develop, for them to explore some ideas more thoroughly. And I think as a result, it works out really well for them. But yeah, this was a great first introduction to Coil Guns as well, who was not a band I was particularly familiar with, but definitely something that I'm considering going in and checking out in a bit more detail, trying out some of their EPs and albums to see if I like their solo material. But certainly their work with Birds in Row seems to be working very well for both bands, quite frankly, because I think this is one of the strongest collections of material that Birds in Row has dropped as well. So yeah, great EP, favorite project of the week. If you don't check out anything else, I would definitely check this one out, because I think this is definitely the thing with the most musical merit that dropped over the last week. Yeah, we were split on that vote by the looks of things. Seemed like there's a vote there for it was a banger, someone else feeling it was a bit mid, but yeah, I guess the general consensus is somewhere in between. But hopefully for those of you who weren't such a big fan of that one, hopefully we find some more stuff that you are a bit of a bigger fan of later on in the show. Moving on to the next album I have to talk about, I don't think we will find what is for you in this next one. At least that's my personal opinion. Maybe you will disagree. We're not going to be listening to any song from it, but feel free to check it out nonetheless. It's the new album from (G)I-DLE, which is simply called 2. It has an album cover which possibly maybe represents the quality of the music on the record, and by that I mean the album cover is not very good, and neither is the album itself, sadly. The song Vision is pretty good, but the rest of it, I don't know. I wasn't. The songs I've named here are probably the songs that I felt like were either, middling or, in the case of Vision, kind of good. The rest of the album, oof. No, a bit of a miss from this band. Just generally, the music on it feels very, very aimless, and it's just annoying in a lot of places, and generally feels quite underwritten. The hooks aren't particularly memorable on most of these tracks either. It's not even like a case of it being sort of mindless fun. It's just mindless and not particularly fun to listen to either. Like I said, it just kind of feels like it gets on my nerves. There's one track on this which is just called Roly, which, oh my lord, no, that one really did not go over very well at all. Yeah, probably one of the weakest tracks that I've heard on an album all year. So yeah, really not seeing the hype for this one. The album cover, yeah, very, very interesting. Graphic design is my passion type stuff. And yeah, I just don't see the appeal of this, quite frankly. And also, they call it the second full album, but it's only 21 minutes, 8 tracks, 21 minutes. I wouldn't call that a full album. I feel like that's an EP's length. In fact, I've listened to EPs that were almost as long as this week. So to call an album that barely pushes the 20-minute mark a full album, I don't know about that. Especially when the musical content of it, it's not even like there's a consistent like narrative throughout it or anything like that ties all the songs together. It just feels like a collection of 8 songs that they've written, and I don't know. I think honestly, if they'd have released Vision as a single and scrapped the rest of the stuff on this one, Revenge in 7 Days are decent, if they're tolerable, but I wouldn't go as far as to call them good songs. And then the rest of it, I just think, is just forgettable. So yeah, this was a 4. This was probably one of my least favorite albums I've heard all year so far, I would say. And yeah, a little bit disappointing, quite frankly, because I've been trying to like K-pop more and more. This was not the album to get me into it, I don't think, unfortunately. I like that new NMIXX project that dropped a couple weeks ago, and generally I think there's been some pretty enjoyable K-pop that's dropped lately, but this is not one of those times. So yeah, not going to play you anything from this one, but if you are really desperate and you think that this might be something that actually might be for you, consider checking out the song Vision, because I think that one is decent, not too bad at all. Right, moving on to the next album. that I listened to this week, and that is the new album from The Last Dinner Party. It's called Prelude to Ecstasy, and well, I thought this one was actually quite good. There's a lot of talk about this band, and not very much of it has been focused on the music whatsoever, actually. Most of it seems to be focused on the sort of background of the artists and sort of how they came up in the industry. Lots of talk about them being sort of industry plants, I suppose, and kind of saying that the success that they've earned so far is undeserved and unwarranted and that kind of thing. But I don't know. I actually feel like this band has more going for it than a lot of so-called industry plants, and I'm very reluctant to use that term anyway, because I don't think using industry connections and using using resources that you have available to you is anything new, especially in the music industry. People say, oh, all these industry plants popping up lately or whatever, but I think that's always actually been a thing in music, and I think just people forget that a lot of them existed, many years ago or whatever, because a lot of them come and go, especially the ones where there isn't much musical merit there and they've just come up because of a connection or something like that. Certainly there have been instances of industry plants that I can think of in the mainstream, which definitely probably didn't warrant being as popular as they were. I can't remember the name of that. God, what were they? They were like a feminist punk group who came up on TikTok and stuff like that, and their music was completely devoid of basically any quality whatsoever. It was very much just designed to be a Tumblr post set to an acoustic guitar. Not anything special at all. But this band, if we can focus on the band I'm actually talking about for a second, I think this band has written a really strong crop of songs there. The singer has an absolutely brilliant voice. I don't think that the lyrics are the most incredible thing I've ever heard in my life, but musically I think these songs are very interesting. They play it quite straight, certainly, but I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. They are some well-written hooks, well-written melodies on a lot of the songs as well. I like the sort of, I don't know how I'd call it, sort of kind of Baroque influence that they seem to be taking in a couple of places as well. And there's even a track in Albanian on this album as well, which is quite interesting. But they seem to be sort of striking a nice balance between being quite creative, but at the same time giving off a very kind of familiar feeling. And I certainly feel like there are lots of people that they can be placed alongside, and I don't think that those comparisons would be completely unwarranted. They are kind of writing music which I think is primarily kind of maybe aimed at more female audiences, a la something like Boy Genius maybe would be not a completely terrible comparison here, but they definitely are making it their own as well. And I really like this one. I think this is one of the stronger records that dropped over the last week, even though as I said before, there weren't that many records that dropped in the last week. I definitely think this is one of the ones I've found myself enjoying the most. I think I would definitely listen to this one a few more times over the course of the year, and I could easily see myself coming back to this quite a few times, because I think that there is quite a lot of good going on here. Not too much bad. I definitely think, like I said, that that lyrically maybe it could be improved a little bit, because I don't think that the lyrics are the most amazing ones I've ever listened to in my life, but musically I think that this is ticking all the right boxes. And I wish these guys a lot of success. I think that's the other thing, is that people call this band industry plants or whatever. I don't feel like they're uber mega famous, not in like an Olivia Rodrigo type way or anything like that, where it went from I'd never heard of her to all of a sudden literally everyone was talking about how amazing she was. This band, I feel like I've kind of caught them on the come up. So yeah, I think this album could be something that actually propels them to some high heights, and I think it would be warranted. So yeah, there we go. And I'm going to play you the song Nothing Matters from this album, and I hope you enjoy it. Well, there we go. That was Nothing Matters, The Last Dinner Party. Nice track, funky track. I enjoy that one. And I feel like, yeah, I don't know. If the industry is planting bands that are making songs as good as this, by all means, plant more. That's the way I see it. Sow those seeds. See if I care. Let's see what you've written here, Luke. Using industry connections to get ahead. If you have industry connections and want to make music, are you just supposed to not use those connections, or maybe you're not allowed to make music at all? Yeah, exactly. I don't think that a lot of criticism that is leveled at people who are considered industry plants is necessarily warranted. I think a lot of the time it's a very reductionist argument that people use to basically sort of delegitimize people's success. At the end of the day, they still have to write the songs, and they have to have the musical talent to be able to write a popular song. Just because you get signed to a record label, just because some TikToks get made with your song in, it doesn't force people to enjoy them. And I think that's the ultimate where it stops, is if people don't enjoy the music, then you're not gonna get popular no matter what happens. If nobody's out there wanting to listen to your song, then you're probably not going to achieve much success. That is a little bit of a meritocracy argument, which I know that the world doesn't necessarily work like that in its entirety. But I definitely think, if you're out there writing complete garbage and it's being flogged off to people, I don't think people are just going to sit down and accept that. So to say like, oh, people can just get famous and popular because they're industry plants or whatever, I think there's more to it than that. That's my personal view, but time will tell. Time will tell to see whether this band has any longevity or not. But certainly, if they keep writing albums that are as strong as this one, then I definitely think I don't have any issue with that at all. Right, moving on to the next project that I want to talk about anyway. And this next one was one that I don't really have many strong feelings on one way or another. That's the new album by Dinosaur Jr. frontman J Mascis. It's okay. It's just not very memorable, I think, is the ultimate criticism I have of this one. That like a lot of albums that I talk about on here, I feel like it just kind of went in one ear and out the other. Just some very sort of kind of generic alt rock songs that don't really have that much of a thrilling trade-off or selling point. It just kind of feels like he's writing some songs and singing some songs and performing some songs. He doesn't have the most incredible voice I've ever heard in my life. The riffs with the guitars are not particularly memorable, and in the case of the more sort of acoustic tracks, I don't think that melodically those are the most attractive songs either. When I think back to when J Mascis was in Dinosaur Jr. Well, I mean, I think he still is, because I think they released an album a couple years ago, actually. But when I think back to the records that they were releasing in sort of the 80s, and I think even into the early 90s a little bit as well, that those had a sort of sticking point, which is that they were doing something that hadn't really been done too much. They weren't the only band in that sort of noise rock lane. You also had the likes of Jesus and Mary Chain, and you had Sonic Youth even. And I feel like now, I mean, yeah, maybe there are some warranted comparisons between them still, in the sense that Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth is also making those kinds of albums that I'm just kind of like, there's just nothing here. There's nothing about this that makes me want to come back to it. It's kind of just music, and there's nothing about it. It's very just bland and unseasoned. I feel like he's clearly just a songwriter who is just kind of plodding along in his career, trying to get by, trying to write some new songs just to generate a bit more hype around him. And I don't know, there's just not really anything about this. The songs aren't bad by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think they're bad in the slightest. He's a very competent songwriter, but there's just nothing here that I think, oh yeah, he's really dug deep for this one, musically or lyrically or emotionally or anything like that. I feel like it's just a very, very by the numbers style album, and I don't know, I can't see any real reason to return to this for any reason other than boredom. Quite frankly, I think that's ultimately how I felt listening to this album, was kind of just like, yeah, there's not really much reason to go back to this one. I still gave it a 6 because, like I said, I think there's nothing that makes it bad per se. You could argue maybe it's a 5, sort of between a 5 and a 6, I would say, is probably where I feel about this album. But yeah, it didn't really do anything for me, so I'm not going to play you anything from this one, and we shall move on to the next album I want to talk to you about, which is the new album from Meth, who are a band that I was not familiar with prior to listening to this album for Realms Album Quest, but they are an Illinois-based sludge metal slash noise rock slash kind of, I don't know, maybe even a little bit sort of doom metal type band. Yeah, really decent stuff. Not reinventing the sludge metal wheel or anything like that, but I certainly think that the path they are treading is not a bad one to be treading. I certainly think that they are treading it very well. They are writing some very gritty kind of, I don't know what the term I would use for is. It feels very raw, very emotionally honest is how I would describe this album. Very vulnerable in a lot of places as well. It reminds me in some places, and particularly on the track I'm going to play to you, the title track, Shame. It reminds me a little bit of Daughters, that album that dropped back in 2018. The You Won't Get What You Want, I believe it was called, minus maybe some of the melodrama of that album. This one feels a bit more honest by comparison, and I must admit I am a big fan of the melodrama on that album I was talking about, even if unfortunately the music has been tainted for me a little bit by some of the things that have happened in the time since that album came out. But yeah, certainly this album, it's called Shame, and I feel like it's a very apt title, because this album does feel like sort of the things that you try and hide from people, the guilt that you feel because of your actions, your own personal shame. It does feel like that. The music feels like it reaches a level of this. Yeah, I think that this is really good. Some of the tracks on this one are certainly heavier than others. And how's it going? Cute Nice as well. Second half gave me a bit of Ken Mode. Yeah, I definitely think that a Ken Mode comparison is founded as well. Yeah, like you said, yeah, I definitely feel like there are some tracks on this one that are a bit heavier than others. They go through a few different styles. I think sludge metal is sort of the primary one, and I definitely feel like the title track does reach that level here. Yeah, normally I would maybe only play you sort of, a selection of maybe sort of 4 minutes of the title track. But given that I haven't got quite as many tracks to play for you this week, just due to the nature of the fact that there weren't that many albums I found this week that I was hugely invested in listening to, I'm actually going to play you the full thing. It's a little over 6 minutes, but hopefully you enjoy it. I think it is a really great song, and yeah, hopefully you are digging the meth. God damn, that was some intense stuff, some very, very intense stuff. So yeah, that was Shame from Shame by Meth. I definitely feel like as I was listening to that, I was only feeling the Daughters comparisons even more, quite frankly, and it kind of reminded me of that solo album that Alexis Marshall did a couple years ago as well. It kind of just sucks that all that stuff came out about him, because yeah, I don't know, the music was really good, but maybe this band will be there to pick up the mantle, so I can finally listen to that kind of music again without feeling guilty about it. But maybe that's what that's kind of what the themes of this album kind of are dealing with a little bit as well. Yeah, I don't know. Great album anyway. I did like this one quite a bit. Honestly, thinking about even bumping it to an 8 possibly. I'll have to give it another listen, but yeah, I thought it was pretty solid sludge metal, and yeah, I think that they definitely have a lot of potential And I can't wait to see what they do going forward. Anyway, we're going to move on to the next segment of the stream now, which is the Happy Birthday 2 segment, where I talk about an album that is celebrating a significant milestone since its release. You may have seen about this one because I saw a few outlets were posting about this. On the 1st of February, I believe it was, they were talking about this album celebrating its 30th anniversary. Now, you may remember last week we talked about Dub No Bass with My Head Man by Underworld, which also was turning 30. And honestly, I think the thing that really kind of resonated with me about this is that I realized those albums were only released about a week apart from one another, and that was kind of crazy to me because they feel like they're from different eras, but actually they were released around the same sort of time. This album, by comparison, feels like it should have come out a lot earlier than that one, and it is perhaps the most beloved album by Green Day, Dookie, which obviously has some of their most iconic songs in their entire discography on it, like Basket Case, like When I Come Around. There's also Welcome to Paradise appears on this one, and I have to say, between talking about the new Green Day record that came out a few weeks ago, re-listening to this one a lot, I think I may have to do a complete reevaluation of Green Day's catalogue, quite frankly, because I have given them some rather unfavourable reviews in the past. I feel like there's only been maybe one or two instances where I've given them even a positive score, but having re-listened to this one a few times over the course of the last week, I was really finding myself enjoying it quite a lot, actually, particularly the most iconic songs from the sort of the album, and generally sort of the band's catalogue. You know, I think Basket Case is probably their most famous song, with the possible exception of something like Boulevard of Broken Dreams or something like that. I feel like, you know, that was really the song that kind of made them popular in the first place. I really actually, yeah, I just enjoy this album a lot. I think the guitar riffs are super catchy, super memorable. I think the hooks are great. I actually think that this album has a lot more musical merit than I gave it credit for when I first heard it all that time ago, back in 2018. I feel like actually the way that they sort of play with dynamics on this record is quite interesting, kind of reminiscent of some of the other movements that existed at the time. You know, that sort of that proto-grunge alt-rock sound that Pixies struck upon, where they were kind of, you know, playing soft and then playing very loud, that kind of became the foundation for the whole grunge movement from, you know, Nirvana and, you know, even Radiohead in their infancy played about with that a little bit. And I feel like Green Day actually do a lot of that here as well, and it means that the choruses on this one really pop in the case of pretty much all of them. You know, if you think about a song like Basket Case, you know, it really just kind of kicks into high gear at one point during the song. The riffs are great on that track. The track Longview, I think, also has you know, some really catchy vocal melodies on that one. Again, the guitar riffs are brilliant. I think you know, Trey Cool is pretty solid on the drums here, does pretty much everything you would expect from this kind of punk record, and just all in all, I think that yeah, I'm kind of surprised that actually maybe I'm ready to admit that I haven't given Green Day anywhere near as much credit as I probably should have done going forward. When I was a kid, part of loving music was hating this Green Day album. I've mellowed out as an adult and enjoy it a lot more today. I think that honestly, part of my taste in music when I was sort of, you know, 16, 17 was kind of a hangover from that era where people kind of just, you know, hated bands like Green Day and a lot of the bands that came kind of over the next wave of pop punk music as well. For example, it took me a very long time to come around on Paramore as well, who I've realized actually have been great this whole time. You know, you think about bands like MCR as well, who actually nowadays are probably one of the most beloved bands in the entire genre. But back then, it feels like there were loads of people who just hated them for no reason other than because it was the cool thing to do, when actually there is a lot of musical merit in some of those bands. I'm not saying all of them necessarily, because certainly I still don't really see the appeal of a band like Fall Out Boy or All Time Low or something like that. Like I said, I know that they're from slightly different eras, but a lot of the pop punk and kind of that kind of sound from the 1990s. If I think about, I'm trying to think of other pop punk bands from that era, and none are coming to mind at the moment. I keep conflating them with Midwest emo, which is a little bit different, but again was kind of disrespected back in the day, and I feel like has undergone a critical reevaluation now. I think that it was overhated at the time, perhaps for the fact that it was a little bit juvenile or something like that. When I was out and about recently, I actually walked past a skate park while I had this album on, when I was doing one of my re-listens to it, and I kind of thought to myself, damn, this would go off if it was playing out loud at this skate park right now. And I just think to myself, sometimes music can be fun, and it can be a little bit juvenile, but at the same time, you have to listen to what is there rather than what isn't there. And I feel like Green Day, are one of those bands that actually maybe weren't so deserving of all the hate that they got. Don't get me wrong, they've written some stinkers in their career. I'm not denying that for 1 second, that certainly it's not been a smooth ride all throughout Green Day's career. But certainly, I think this album is probably one of the strongest efforts they've put out, and I think has a number of fantastic songs on it. And even some of the sort of deep cuts on this record, I actually think hit quite hard as well. So yeah, it's a good album. If you haven't listened to it and you haven't enjoyed it already, then I definitely would recommend giving it a spin. And if you have listened to it and disliked it in the past, I'd recommend giving it another try, because actually I think there's a lot more here than maybe you pick up on first listen. As for the Imagine Dragons hate, you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer for me to come around on that one, I'm afraid. But never say never. That's all I'll say. Anyway, I am going to leave you in the comfortable hands of the song Basket Case, and I hope you enjoy. Alright then, get your votes in on that one. Did you think that was a banger, or how were you feeling about it? For me, yeah, I think that's comfortably one of their best songs. I do agree in the sense that I wasn't a huge fan of the quote-unquote sellout era of Green Day, even if, the music that people kind of shit on them for isn't necessarily as bad as people make it out to be. Like, for example, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, lyrically the song's a little bit one note. If you actually analyze the lyrics of that song, you will realize that it's basically just a slightly more musically interesting version of the song All By Myself from this album, which was kind of just a little mini interlude tacked on at the end, where he just, in a lot of different ways, says that he was alone. And that's kind of the same with Boulevard of Broken Dreams. If you actually look at the lyrics, they're basically just, yeah, I'm alone, and I'm also alone, and I'm by myself, and I'm alone. But it's still, it's pretty musically interesting. I think a lot of the other songs from that album are pretty decent as well. So yeah, I'm a fan. Phil, thank you very much for the sub. I appreciate that. I got my alerts turned off, but I do see you, and I'm very thankful for the subscription as well. I hope you're doing very well, my friend. And yeah, it seems like a lot of you thought that one was a banger, so I'm glad you enjoyed. And we're going to move on to the next segment of the stream. We're going to head back to the new albums, What's New Part 2. It rhymes, it's never going to get old. And yeah, I got 4 new projects, a couple EPs, a couple albums to talk to you guys about, and we'll see how you feel about some songs from these ones as well. So the first one I want to talk about is the new album from the God Fahim in collaboration with the producer Cookin' Soul, Supreme Dump Legend, Soul Cook Saga. It's another album from the God Fahim. He drops a lot of them. He's a very prolific rapper, teaming up with lots of different producers, a bit in the sort of same vein as Boldy James, I suppose, in the sense that he very much, his approach seems to be kind of making a whole project with one producer and then maybe doing another project with a producer, rather than having lots of different styles on the same record. He kind of, stays in one particular lane, and on this one it is very much that sort of classic boom bap rap sound that you would expect from, you know, some classic rap records of you know, the late 90s, early 2000s. That kind of sound seems to translate through here. You know, you think about the kind of rap music that you would kind of want to sit in a convertible car, top down, you know, your hair sort of flowing in the wind as you're just kind of cruising through a busy city street or something like that. This is the kind of music for that. I think lyrically, the God Fahim is on pretty good form here. You know, lots of interesting song topics here. The beats are absolutely fantastic. I think Cookin Soul has brought a really great approach to this one. You know, they're jazzy in places and they hit hard. I think the production is very, very clean. And yeah, the only criticism I have of this one is that there's a few features on here that I don't think are particularly interesting. Generally speaking, I don't think they add much to the record itself. I would have just preferred either for the record to be a little bit shorter, although that said, it is already quite short, only about 27-28 minutes. It's not the longest album in the world. You know, not really enough time for me to sit with it and form a full impression of the whole thing, but I suppose that's maybe the drawback to making as many projects as the God Fahim makes, is that you know, you don't really get these long fleshed out projects. You kind of tend to just get sort of shorter ones. Mac Homie is the same though, and I absolutely love Mac Homie, so yeah, maybe I shouldn't criticize too much, but in any case, I think that this is a very strong record, and you know, I think that it is one of the best records from the God Fahim that I've heard. I actually think I probably prefer this one a little bit to that record that he dropped with Mac Homie. I think it was last year. That one was okay, but not one of Mac Homie's best. But I definitely think the God Fahim has redeemed himself a little bit on this one, and teaming up with Cookin Soul has done him a lot of favors. So yeah, not my favorite album by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly a pretty decent addition to his collection. And I'm going to play you the song Get Your Weight Up, which is my favorite track from this record. So that was Get Your Weight Up, the God Fahim, Cookin Soul, one of the best tracks off that record for sure. Get your votes in. Did you think that one was a banger or not? I have to say, my respect for Cookin Soul was elevated a lot when I saw his Spotify picture. It's him in the studio, and he's got some records on the wall behind him, and one of the records he's got there is that album Scenery by Ryo Fukui, which is one of the greatest jazz records of all time. I think that yeah, it is comfortably one of the best jazz records of all time. So yeah, it was nice to see him with the album on his back wall there, showing that he clearly has good taste in the samples that he is picking and choosing from, and shown to great effect on that one, because there were some really nice sort of jazzy samples on that track as well. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that one. I think this is not one of the most outstanding rap records I've ever heard, certainly, but you know, it is another pretty decent, solid, consistent effort from the God Fahim. And so it was nice to see that. Anyway, we're going to now talk about an EP that I thought was alright that came out this week, and that is the new EP from Hit Boy and The Alchemist, two more rap producers that have teamed up to produce a record together. It's called Theodore and Andre. It is only 10 minutes long, 3 songs. It is just a short EP from the two of them. Perhaps the thing I was most surprised to see is that both of them were actually rapping on this one, for two people who are you know, primarily better known as producers and have produced some of the most iconic rap albums or in recent memory. You know, you think about that album that Freddie Gibbs did with The Alchemist, Alfredo, which was one of the best albums of 2020 for sure. Hit Boy, he handled a lot of the production for King's Disease 3 by Nas, which came out in 2022, which was one of my favorite rap records of that year. You know, these guys have some serious producer cred in the game, certainly recently, but The Alchemist has been around for a very long time, actually, and he's done quite a lot of amazing stuff in that time. So yeah, these guys are not new to the scene by any stretch of the imagination, and on this record I think that they have they've done pretty well. You know, the beats are pretty solid. You know, the kind of style you'd expect, that kind of sort of hazy, foggy, sort of slightly jazzy hip-hop. The raps are fine, I guess. They're not the most outstanding thing in the world. I definitely see why they are producers before rappers. I think that certainly that's where their strengths lie, but I don't think there's anything inherently bad about this record. It's just simply not the most amazing thing in the world. It certainly is a collaboration which looks absolutely massive on paper, but I don't think there is too much to write home about in terms of the overall quality of the music. I think it is just decent, not too bad production-wise. Pretty solid, as you would expect from two of the most exciting producers in the game at the moment. But rap-wise, I think this album would not have been made worse by bringing on a few people to feature on it instead, perhaps. But maybe that wasn't an option for these guys. I don't know. In any case, you know, it's only 10 minutes. Give it a try. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you won't. But I'm not going to play you anything from this one because I don't think there is really anything, particularly interesting worth playing from this record. But we will move on to the next EP that I want to talk to you about. Another 10-minute project from 8485. Software Gore is the name of the EP. And again, this one was pretty decent. A nice little glitch pop EP that I feel like wanted to kind of come across as this sort of, I'm unhinged, I'm crazy, I'm out of control kind of thing. And, all these sort of glitchy embellishments and these sort of loud, abrasive production choices on the thing kind of wanted to give off that vibe. But I don't think I'm totally sold on it, unfortunately. I don't think that they've totally kind of come across convincing me that necessarily they are as crazy and out there and unhinged as they would have you believe. But I don't think it's bad necessarily. I think the songs on this are decent. I think the production is pretty interesting. Certainly on that final track, Anthropol, I think that is by far the best track on this thing. There is an interlude on this one as well, which I don't really think adds too much. It's just got another sample, which is kind of trying to be like, this album is kind of weird and strange and vaguely sort of psychedelic, but I just don't think that it adds that much value to an EP which is only 10 minutes to begin with. Enjoy this one or don't. I don't think that it's that bad. Certainly there is a bit of musical merit in this one, but I don't see it being something that I return to all too much. So again, not going to play you anything from this one, but if you do check anything out from this EP, definitely check out the song Anthropol. I think it's a pretty good one, and maybe you will like the whole project more than I will. Only 10 minutes. It's not too much of a time investment if it is something that you feel like you may be interested in. And now we're going to move on to the final album that I want to talk to you about in the What's New section this week, and that is the new album from Asian Glow. Unwired Detour is the name of the album. Came out yesterday. It is confirmed to be the final album that they are releasing under the Asian Glow moniker, and I am a little bit sad about that news actually, because I have liked pretty much everything that they have done up to this point. I was a big fan of Cull Feicl, the album that they debuted with back in 2021. Stalled Flutes Means was one of my albums of the year in 2022. I was a huge fan of that one. Then we had a few collaborative efforts as well. We had the Paraglow EP, which they made with Parannoul, of course. There was I can't remember the name of the record that they did in collaboration with Parannoul and Sonyos Tomam Konta, but that one was very strong as well. And then they did another collaborative record, Dream Glow, with Sonyos Tomam Konta as well, which was again an absolutely great record. Lots of screamo influences on that one, which I thought came over very nicely. And now we finally reached this point, Unwired Detour, and I think it is honestly one of the better projects in Asian Glow's discography, which is saying something because I have been a big fan of pretty much all of them. But I think that they have realized their potential on this thing. I think they have come out with some of the strongest batch of melodies, of hooks. I think lyrically and vocally, I think they are on absolutely top form on this record, and they have they have done all the stuff that they've been doing before to great effect. You know, I think they've come out with a lot of emo influences on this thing again, which I think sound very good. I think the noisier aspects of this record are done very well, so as to not be, you know, absolutely deafening, whilst also still being, you know, having a lot of merit and being very interesting. Melodically, I think this record is absolutely beautiful at times. And yeah, I think just generally it's a very strong note to go out on. I think it is a shame that the project is coming to an end, although they have indicated that they will be releasing music under another name going forward. I think the idea they were saying was just that they're simply not in the mindset that they were when they sort of founded Asian Glow a few years ago. I actually discovered that they're about the same age as me as well, so it's kind of remarkable that that they've already come out with many albums that I think are of you know, very high quality. And yeah, it seems like maybe they're only getting started, moving on to a new project going forward. It'll be interesting to see what that ends up being, how that ends up sounding, how it will differ from the Asian Glow sound. But we will always have these records, and I'm glad that we got one last one to see off the project with. And yeah, like I said, I think it's one of their strongest efforts, so I am by no means upset with this album in that sense. So yeah, I am going to play for you the song Light Pipe, which is probably my favorite track off this one. Really great melodies on this one, really great chord progressions, and you know, I think the whole track just generally progresses in a really nice way. So hopefully you guys enjoy this one, and yeah, Light Pipe. There we go, Light Pipe by Asian Glow off the new album Unwired Detour. I think I will be spinning this one quite a few times as the year goes on, because like I said, I have been a big fan of Asian Glow for pretty much the entire duration of the project. Ever since I heard that first record that dropped all the way back in 2021, I was glad that that one blew up in my direction, because you know, I definitely think it had a lot going for it, and I think that they have only improved in that time. You know, they are very closely associated with Parannoul on the same record. Longinus Recordings is the record label, and you know, I think that all those artists getting the attention that they got is really great to see, because I think they all deserve it quite a lot. And yeah, I'm very, very excited to see what they do going forward. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. The consensus on that one did seem to be banger, so I'm glad. And yeah, that is the end of the What's New section. So that only leaves the next segment to go, and that is, of course, the 1K Odyssey. For those of you who aren't familiar with the 1K Odyssey, I will briefly explain the concept to you. A little while ago, a few people said to me they would be interested in seeing me collate a list of the 1,000 greatest albums of all time, and back then I felt hideously unequipped to be able to communicate a list of 1,000 albums that I felt were the most you know, the most significant albums of all time, the greatest albums of all time. And I feel like I'm finally in a point where I've listened to enough music to start putting a list like that together. And so every week I take one album, which by that point I'm absolutely certain should be on this list, and I talk about it a little bit, why it's significant to me, why I think it's one of the greatest albums of all time, and then, as always, I'll play you a song from it so you can get a sense of what the album is like as well. And the album that I have chosen this week is one of the most influential electronic albums of all time. One of the most significant records that really kind of, you know, I think represented a shift in the sound of electronic music in the mid to late 2000s, and this one ended up dropping in 2010. And yeah, this is one of the most influential artists in that sort of you know, I hate to use the term IDM, but in this case I honestly do feel like it is appropriate. In the IDM scene, in the sort of wonky you know, glitch hop kind of scene, you may have already figured it out. It is, of course, Cosmogramma by Flying Lotus, one of my favorite albums ever. It may not surprise you to learn. I first listened to this one when I was about 15, 16, and it blew me away. You know, compared to a lot of the electronic music that I was listening to back then, this album represented something really special a lot of the production on a lot of records I was listening to back in that time, it's kind of hard exactly to explain how it felt, but it just, it felt incredibly synthetic, and it felt so overbearingly produced is probably the best way I can describe that. And by comparison, this album was like a breath of fresh air compared to all of that. Welcome to the stream, by the way, Ryan. I hope you're doing well. Welcome in. This album felt like such a breath of fresh air compared to all the synthetic stuff I was listening to in sort of 2015, 2016, around that sort of time. This album encompasses a lot more sort of natural elements. There's a lot of, strings and guitars and all that kind of thing on this album, even a bit of brass in some places as well. But the thing it never loses sight of the whole time you're listening to it is the fact that it is, first and foremost, absolutely unabashedly, unashamedly an electronic music record. There are glitchy beats, there are weird sort of off-kilter, dissonant synth sounds on this one. A lot of it feels like it's kind of a big pastiche of sound, and it kind of has this underlying ethos of hip-hop, I suppose, because that's the kind of era that Flying Lotus kind of grew up in, was that he was obviously being exposed to a lot of hip hop, and he so seamlessly incorporated that with music that was very electronic and synthetic sounding, and was also very, at times, jazzy and psychedelic and that kind of thing. There is a myriad of influences on this album, and I feel like he just really struck upon a sound that just worked on this album. He's got some other great albums as well. In fact, I actually think that some of the other albums of his that perhaps don't have quite the same acclaim as this one are a little bit underrated, but I can talk about those another time. But this is where he struck gold. This is Flying Lotus's magnum opus. If the music that he's been releasing lately is any indication, I think that this is likely to stay Flying Lotus's magnum opus for probably the rest of his career. I don't see how he's going to write another era-defining, game-changing record like this one. I don't think I can really understate the influence of this one. On the song Galaxy and Janaki, I hear so many artists in that sort of, that purple sound and wonky kind of space that came out of this. That was the blueprint for it, and it's no surprise when you read interviews with artists in that space, who are the people that they attribute their sound to the most. It's people like Flying Lotus. If you think about someone like Sam Galatry or something like that, when he was coming up, he was influenced so heavily by an artist like Flying Lotus. The song Galaxy and Janaki sounds so much like the song Reflections by Sam Galatry that I honestly feel like there are so many parallels that you can draw between the two. The influence, production-wise, mixing-wise, the way that this album is mixed is so creative. The way that all the elements kind of pop and then disappear as quickly as they've kind of arrived. It is honestly a masterpiece in sound engineering, this record as well. Like I said, I think that kind of pastiche vibe, in some places it gets a little bit chaotic, certainly, but I think the chaos is okay, because you always know that there is going to be some kind of order coming around the corner. Whether it's the slightly calmer tracks of like with Thundercat, or that one with Tom York as well, The World Laughs With You, which is another fantastic kind of moody, brooding kind of song. I feel like the Tom York influence on that one is very prevalent. But you've also got these very heavy electronic songs like Computer Face and like Galaxy and Janaki. You've got the song Table Tennis, where the beat literally is a sample of a table tennis ball bouncing across the table. And the culmination of this record, the climactic moment of this record, and I think the song this record will be remembered for forever, is that song Do the Astral Plane, which is kind of a proto electro house, electro swing type track, but is so unique compared to all the crap that came after it. in the sense that, you know, these electronic synths are so in your face, and then the more sort of psychedelic and theatrical and classical elements even that kind of you know, soothe your ears in the background are always there to just remind you that even though it's getting a little bit chaotic, and even though it's getting a little bit frantic and a little bit frenzied, it's okay. You know, it won't be like this forever. It's calm, it's chill. You know, you're gonna be all right. I think that is the beauty of this album in a nutshell, is that it never leaves you lost. There's always something there to guide you through the madness of this record, and I think that's the true genius of this record. It will forever be one of my favorite albums of all time. Of this I am certain. You know, I first heard it 8 years ago, and I don't think at any point in those last 8 years have I ever given any indication to anyone that this is anything other than one of my favorite records. Yeah, I absolutely love this one. I think this is maybe the best electronic music album that has ever been made. There's certainly a couple other contenders for that title, so I won't go out on a limb and say it's definitely my favorite electronic music album, but certainly, you know, in an era where artists like Skrillex were coming up in the electronic music scene, Flying Lotus was there, and he was there to be like, it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to just be an all-out assault on your ears. It can be something else. And I think that's the brilliance of this record. So yeah, I'm gonna play you the song "Do the Astral Plane," and I hope you enjoy it. All right, get your votes in on that one. Did you think that was a banger or no? If you didn't, I'd be very curious to know why, because that thing slaps so hard. I remember the first time I ever heard that song. It was actually on a Twitch stream, believe it or not. It was one of my good friends in the speedrunning community was doing some speedrun practice, had some music on in the background. This song came on. I was like, dude, you gotta tell me what this song is. And he was like, oh yeah, I think you'd actually really like Flying Lotus. So I checked out Flying Lotus. It took me a while to track down the song itself. But when I did, believe me, we have been partying ever since. And yeah, I think this is one of the only songs, Do the Astral Plane, one of the only songs that has made it into one of my Spotify top 100 playlists on more than 2 occasions. You know, I can only think of a handful of songs that have made it in 3 times, and this is one of them, and that's because this song is immensely special to me. This whole album is immensely special to me, and yeah, Flying Lotus, I think forever will be one of my favorite artists, no matter if he doesn't drop a good record ever again. I think just the nature of how good this album and the other albums in his catalog are, I think is more than enough to cement him as one of my all-time greats. And that is why this is one of my favorite albums of all time. That's why I think this is one of the 1000 greatest albums of all time. And yeah, I really, really do believe that that this album, you know, changed electronic music for the better for a very long time. And you know, we still see his influence even today. Is such as the nature of how amazing Flying Lotus was. You know, he's got some amazing cred of people that he's worked with. People like he's worked with JPEG Mafia, he's worked with Danny Brown, he's worked with Kendrick Lamar, Thundercat, all of these people. You know, he has got a hand in production on something that they have made at some point in time, and you know, it is for good reason. So yeah, a very, very fantastic record, and one of the 1000 greatest albums of all time, no doubt about it. So that leaves me with only one thing left to do, which is the number of albums I've listened to total. Of course, 6,842 is the number. That is where we are on the quest already, getting quite close to 7,000 now, not too far away. I anticipate it will be maybe a little over a month before we make it there. Certainly by the end of March, I definitely think that we will be in that 7,000 ballpark with the rate that I'm going. So yeah, I will as always keep you updated on this. And well, we're not too far away. Can you imagine if I get the pleasure of writing 6969 on here in a few weeks' time? That would make me immensely happy to be able to do that. So I might honestly even try and engineer that to be possible. It will be tough, but you know, there can be miracles if you believe. So yeah, there is only one song left for me to play to you. It is a brand new single from an upcoming album that I am very much looking forward to. We'll definitely be reviewing it when it comes out, because it is definitely going to be a significant enough event when it does. It is the new album from Everything Everything. I actually can't remember the name of the record now off the top of my head, but the name of the song is called The End of the Contender. And yeah, like I said, it is coming off the brand new record from Everything Everything, out on the 1st of March, which is titled Mountainhead. I just got that one for you there. Yeah, honestly, not been a big fan of Everything Everything in the past. They do have some decent songs, and I wasn't super hyped for this album until today when I heard this song for the first time, and all of a sudden I am ready for this album. What can I say? It's probably one of my favorite songs I think they've ever done. Vocally, I think that the vocalist is absolutely top notch on this one. Musically, very interesting song. I just think Everything keep getting better, quite frankly. They've got some great albums, and hopefully this one will prove to be no exception to that. But yeah, as far as Realms Album Quest is concerned, we will be back here again tomorrow. Not tomorrow, what am I talking about? We'll be back here again next Monday, 7 p.m. GMT, as per usual. Hopefully with a few more albums to talk about than we had to talk about this week. There were still some pretty good projects that dropped this week, but nothing I envision that I will be talking about too much more in the future. So yeah, a lot of exciting records dropping on Friday this week, which I'm looking forward to listening to. And we've also got, as always, we'll be doing the happy birthday section again. I've got an album that I'm quite excited to talk to you about for that one as well, celebrating its 20th anniversary. So we'll talk about that one, and also we will have that 1K Odyssey album, which I am looking forward to talking to you about why that is one of my favorite albums of all time as well. So yeah, that is going to be it for the stream. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, please do make sure to like and subscribe as well, because it really is very helpful. And if there's anyone here on Twitch who isn't following, then do consider dropping a follow, because that also helps me out immensely. Playlist will be linked in the YouTube description, and also you can go and check out the YouTube channel if you are watching this on Twitch to catch up on any of these streams that you may have missed. And I will now play you out with that new song, The End of the Contender by Everything Everything, and hopefully I will see you guys next week for another edition of Realms Album Quest. Oh, and do stick around, because we will be raiding somebody. So there is a point to sticking around. I've done enough waffling. End of the Contender, Everything Everything. Here we go.